everybody. Hope you're doing marvelously well. We are back here with Michael Romanowski. How are you?
I'm doing great. How are you doing?
I'm fantastic.
You are fantastic.
Oh. And you're marvelous.
Oh, yeah, that's very sweet of you. All right, thank you.
We're going to do 6. We've narrowed it down.
Oh,
We've been talking off camera.
Okay.
6 tips from a mastering engineer. Basically, what you want presented to you, how you like the mixes presented. But it's not even so much about what you want, it's what is best.
Right. Good. Okay, cool. That's great. I think that'd be a very helpful thing for people to know, to be able to know how to be prepared to come into a mastering situation and get the best results out of the end.
And also what is truly wonderful is the lovely folks at SPL are letting us do a giveaway of the Phonitor.
Really?
Yeah.
That's awesome.
So that's going to be included in this. As ever, that means there's like a notification down here somewhere and hit some buttons and do some stuff, and you have a rather good chance of winning this, which I want as well.
Right. Not that particular one, because you'd have to pry that off my hands.
I think Eric already packed in the back of the car.
Ah, damn it, Eric.
All right, so let's get started.
Number 1, don't clip your mix. Obviously, you do not want to square off the mix. We want to keep as much information as possible. So when you start to square off and you're losing transients, those aren't things that I can bring back. So number 1, and a very easy thing to handle, is to just make sure and not clip your mix. Keep your levels down to where you're getting all the information out of your mix and presenting it to me. Number 2, another thing you want to do is make sure and bring to a mastering engineer the highest resolution that you've been working at. We want to make sure that you don't do any sample rate conversion, any bit rate, word length reduction, anything like that. We want to start with the highest possible. Now, I'm a big fan of high resolution audio, and I think people should be working with high resolution audio for a lot of different reasons. One of them is processing, and one of them is the noise floor and the headroom gained by having high resolution. It's also future-proof. It's also making sure that you've got content and you've got music that's ready for future. You're not locked in at the wax cylinder stage, for example, an extreme example. But to make sure that you're ready for the future with high resolution files. Therefore, I would also want you to bring those to me so we can master at that same rate. Now, for the most part, I choose to run to analog equipment. I like the way it feels. I like the way it sounds. So I'm not going to do any math to it to be able to get to that word length sample rate reduction until the very end. So please don't do that before you bring it to a mastering facility.
So in short, if you're recording at 24-bit or 32-bit, 48K, 96K, whatever it is, keep it there.
Keep it there. And I would say as a corollary would be is if you have mixed rates, like let's say you started one song at one rate, one song at another, no need to coalesce them into the same thing and find the least or highest common denominator. I want it just as it is, because that way there's a whole lot less math and processing involved in that. So let me start with the native, no matter what it happens to be. It doesn't need to all be at the same rate.
So if you recorded it at 48K, you're not going to gain anything by just quickly telling it to save it to 96. If you didn't record at 96, there's no reason to
no reason to upsample it.
Okay,
no reason to upsample it. So number 3 would be do not overprocess the master bus. There's a whole bunch of reasons for that, and there's a whole bunch of intentional reasons why people do things on the master bus. But I will say the least that you can do, the better. I can't undo things like overcompression. So if you are compressing the master bus and limiting it, for example, because you want to make it loud, you think that delivering a loud mix is going to end up with a better product, it's actually quite the opposite. First thing I'd have to do when it's loud is to turn it down, because when the energy level is getting to the top, I can't add any EQ or anything that's going to add more energy to that. It's already to the top. I have to turn it down before I can even start. So there's one reason for doing that. The other is that I can't take away those things. Like if it needs to feel like there's a little bit more change in transitions, softer section, sensitive third verse, intro, outro, whatever it happens to be before getting into a chorus, and you want to keep those dynamics, those changes within that, I can't get those back. Like I said, I like analogies. To me, it's like the equivalent of I can't take flour out of a cake that's already been baked. It's already in it. I can't take it out. Now I can mess with it. I can try to adjust it in a few different ways, but I can't undo that. So So the overprocessing, now I'm not against processing. This is a longer answer, but I'm not, if that's okay to run for a second. I said soapboxes, so here you go.
No, it's quite okay.
All right, so I said the overprocessing part on the master bus. I'm not against processing on the master bus that does something with intent. It gives a feel, it gives a sound, it gives a direction where you're trying to go with it, whether it's a EQ or compression. But I would be very careful doing those things because you think you should, or because you think you have to give a loud mix to make sure and impress your client. I think that if you're doing it because it does something that gets you where you want to go, that's great. If you're doing it for other reasons like loudness or brightness, then don't. We can do that at the mastering stage, and can actually take it further than what it can be brought to me at that when it's as they call it, heated, an overheated mix. That actually kind of leads into another, to potentially number 4.
Well, before we get on to number 4, how about multiband compression?
I am not a fan of multiband compression. I hate multiband compression. I will say, I'll say that with an asterisk, because actually multiband compression is like any other tool used in a fashion that gets you where you want to go. A great tool is a great tool. Great hammer, when you need a screwdriver, not so good, but you need to put a nail in, great, the hammer is good. The multiband compression thing, like I'll find myself when I'm doing a mix, I'm doing something and I might go like, oh, the overheads, I can sculpt the sound a little bit, maybe a little multiband or some dynamic EQ that may help with something with particular. On an overall mix, though, I'm against it for a lot of reasons. One, beyond just the phase problems at the crossover points, but the other is that you're changing the nature of the instruments within themselves across different bands that aren't really related to maybe what might be their peak. Like if you say guitars are going to come in the mid-range over here and you're doing something to the low end, we'll realize there are guitars down here. There's also cymbals in the low end. There's also kick drum in the top end. There's, when you start messing with the compression ratios and attack and release characteristics, as well as thresholds of all that across all these different bands, you're changing the nature of the instruments to themselves, which is throwing off the balance of the mix that was made there in the first place. It's getting rid of those decisions because you're changing the nature of it. I don't agree with multi-band compression in a mastering facility, as a mastering process.
You would use it specifically just to fix a problem that you had no other way of fixing, maybe.
I can't say I haven't used it.
Sure.
Right, and I would say that's just a general rule for everything, is that rules will always be broken. And I have used it occasionally if I've exhausted my resources and I still need to try to solve a problem and it can't be remixed, or it has a release deadline and it has to go out, or a tour is starting, or whatever it happens to be that means it needs to be done right away. So I will use it, but it's very easy to overdo it and screw things up with multiband compression. So if you feel like you have to, be very light about it.
For me, it's wonderful on instruments that need consistency, such as bass guitars.
Right.
Keeping that bass just pumping, right. 200 and below, just even the whole time. It's absolutely amazing.
Right.
Just like a dynamic EQ on a vocal can be amazing, where there's different kind of like
right.
air that you're trying to add, but it's moving. Because
right.
the human voice is so unbelievably dynamic, but I understand. Yeah, putting on your mix bus. So sorry to push you on that, because I get lots of people sending me mixes, and I open them up, and there's like tons of multiband stuff going on. Sometimes 2 or 3 different things to make sure it's consistently loud the whole time.
Yeah.
But you're right. For me, it sort of softens things and loses impact.
Well, and I talked about this a little bit earlier, that I feel like music is a human experience, as an expression. And I'll venture down a rabbit hole for a minute. Like a piano player goes like this and plays, and here's their chord, and these fingers are stronger than these fingers. That same voicing is going to sound different with a different piano player because of how they play, their strengths and weaknesses, and those little interdynamics are things that give you a clue as to who the player is and the art and their expression. When you homogenize those things and we take all of those things out, and even the frequencies across, like with a multiband, for example, you're taking away what it is, the expression about that person and that music and what they're trying to get across. You're taking those elements, that human nature, out of it. So I'm a fan of trying to keep things, as related to the experience of playing an instrument, of writing a song, of presenting it in a certain way. When we take those things out, and multiband is an easy way to make sure everything's loud and everything's across the board and every frequency all hits the same levels and all of that. But that's not music. That's not, to me, that's not musical. That doesn't draw me in. That pushes me back. Right. So. That was a long answer. That was
well, it's not. It answered your question.
Or that's my question. Well, all right. And there's a soapbox waiting over here for.
Sorry.
Well, and the other is leave enough headroom. Would that be number 5? The next thing, make sure there's enough headroom just so I can work. Turning the master down, so this is not headroom, is slamming it, limiting it, and then turning the master down so I still get the slammed version. It's only 3 dB or 6 dB down from the top. That's not the same thing as leaving some dynamics and leaving some room in there. So what I would say is, what I would like to see is, give me 3 or 4 dB of headroom from peak to 0. Give me minus 8, 10, 12 dB or more of VU, just to be able to or RMS, to be able to have to have some dynamic range to work with. I can pull it up and I can do all of those things to help get it to where you want to be able to get it to, but I can't undo the things that do it too much to get there. But I can take it further than it could go if you give me some room to work.
Marvelous.
If you're driving a big tractor trailer, you got to have some room to navigate the turn. You can't just. That's not a good analogy, but.
Oh, okay.
And another thing would be to make sure collaborate. Your mastering engineer is there to work with you, not against you. They're not there to tell you, what's wrong or anything like that. They're to help to guide you. They want the best out of your record that your artist does as a producer and engineer, or as you do as an artist. I would say choose somebody to work with as a mastering engineer that is there to help guide you or talk you through the process. Maybe to fill in some gaps about some delivery mechanisms. How are you getting this off to the manufacturer? What needs to be brought in as files for mastering? What you can hope to get out of this on the process itself, what the expectations may be. But it also will help illuminate and give some ideas into, like I'll have a conversation with somebody new. Let's say somebody calls me up and it's a new client and we have start a dialogue. I get to understand a little bit about how they describe things. Engineering and producing is also a psychology aspect of it, is understanding what your clients are saying. They want to feel heard. You want to hear them. You want to be able to know what they're trying to get out of it. Having that dialogue can really help make sure that you're going the right direction with the master. Are you trying to get it to this sort of feel, this sort of vibe? As well as, beyond the mechanics of it, of knowing what's going to be the best thing to be able to deliver. You're putting out vinyl, you're doing high-res downloads, you're doing CDs, you're doing Blu-rays, whatever it happens to be. They're there to guide. Your mastering engineer should be there to help guide you through that process and be there with you and a part of it. So, it's also a learning aspect. It's also a reason to be able to listen. You're working with somebody as a mix engineer, and you end up hearing something and going, I tell you what I'm hearing. Consistently, there's let's say that there's a 300 hertz bump in some, across all of your mixes. You may want to look at your monitoring environment. It might be that your monitors are telling you there's not that much information in there. Therefore, you're adding it when it doesn't need to be there. So working with a mastering engineer that is not the mix engineer of the project can really help you elevate your mixes as well.
I agree.
And that works as building a long-term relationship with a mastering engineer and a producer mixer.
Yep.
Absolutely.
I can attest to that.
Yeah.
I've learned more from my mastering engineer than I could on my own.
Yeah. And it affects the things you do down the road. And next thing you do, you go, oh, I'm keeping this in mind. Okay, cool. And
Just because I don't personally have these speakers at home.
Well, Paul's going to take care of that.
Oh, Paul's going to take care of that. Okay.
Okay, last and certainly not least, the mastering engineer needs to hear what the client has been listening to. If you've been making a mix and it's been approved by the label or the artist, and it's something that you've been pushing a little bit because you know that they're going to listen to records or compare the mix to things that they are already well familiar with, remember those things are done, mastered, and released. This, however, has not been that case yet because you're still coming to mastering. However, you've been listening to a mix that is compressed and does have these characteristics to it. What I would want delivered to me would be the unheated, as they say, mix that's not been pushed. But I also want to hear what the client's been listening to. I need to know what they've been listening to that made them approve the mix in the first place. So back to a previous point about bringing something that is not too compressed or too processed on the master bus. That's what I would love to work with. However, I still want to hear what's been sent off to the manufacturer or sent off to the artist or sent off to sent off to the label, sent off to the artist that they've approved the mixes, because I need to know what they've been listening to so I can judge what characteristics about that led them to approve that, head that direction, and then take it further.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, often we do little boom and fizz, little extra 60, little extra 12, which isn't so bad.
Yeah.
However, they might be pushing the high mids really aggressively to make it sound super, super loud.
Right.
And then they give you something that is not like that.
Right.
If you hadn't heard that as a reference.
Right. I wouldn't know that was something that they were already listening to, and that was something that was important to them as a final, as how they're trying to present themselves.
Yeah, suddenly, the aggressive snare drum, aggressive vocal, and aggressive electric guitars is no longer in the mix.
Right. Becomes yacht rock, and they go, what happened to my record?
Yep.
Yeah. You go, because we've been listening to it like this.
Yep.
Well, that's right, and I need to hear that to know what they've been listening to. I think that's all very good practical processes that help make a better record.
Marvelous.
Yeah. Things, what they call best practices.
Well, two things.
Best practices.
We're going to do a little cheat sheet down here. You're going to be able to download. So you're going to be able to download this, and we'll have a nice cheat sheet of all these points.
Oh, yeah.
But also, you're going to be able to win the Phonitor.
Yeah.
So, click on the links. You know what to do to enter. Please leave any comments and questions. If you think there's these points, and you want to expand upon them, you've had your own discussions with your mastering engineer. If you want to suggest some other things, I'm all ears. I'm definitely love this conversation.
I'd be happy to respond to any more comments, because we only got 5 or 6. I mean, there's 6. So we only got 6. There's a long list, and we could keep going. So if you want to add to it and you want a response from me about your thoughts on that, I would be happy to respond.
Excellent. Well, now you're completely thrown under the bus.
Now I'm stuck. No, I volunteered. This is awesome. This has been really fun.
Marvelous. All right, so don't forget to enter. This Phonitor is amazing. That single control that allows you to bring the middle in from left to right with headphones on is worth its weight in gold.
Yeah, yeah.
That alone makes it worth the money.
If you do any kind of diagnostic work or anything where you have to really make decisions on that headphone amp really can really make a big difference.
Marvelous.
It's fantastic.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Warren. Appreciate it. Thank you.
So please enter to win. Don't forget to subscribe, hit notification bell, and leave comments and questions below.